But you're not going to be here in hiding while everyone else does the work. This is your mess, and you're going to help clean it up. If there is anything that they can use against you, you need to tell me now. This is Bedtime Stories, Grownup Edition, Resurrection, Bonus Episode 2, Part 1. When we left off, Catherine was frustrated, confused, and embarrassed. She was not new to the world of men who didn't know how to accept no as a final answer. And dealing with the situation with the International Trafficking Organization had provided her an unneeded education in the lengths that some would go to get their rocks off. She'd unfortunately learned that that particular brand of violence was not even about sex. It was about control, deviance, and a brand of evil that had no place in the five families. She did not want to be associated with any man who would do the things that Sincere had been accused of. And that was the main source of her embarrassment. But she was also embarrassed that one of the soldiers in her employ had literally gotten the shock of his life when he'd attempted to spy on one of her guests, a guest who was the daughter of a general in the Lopez organization and the girlfriend of her stepson. She was also confused about how exactly folks was managing to run wild in her castle. It was clearly time to clean up shop. She was also confused, though, about how Sincere had fooled her. She was sure that she was dealing with an adult child who just needed some direction. A man who had not had the full benefit of truly involved and really invested parents. Nothing about that would have even suggested that Annabelle and Nigel had raised a damn predator. If her math was right, Sincere was just 18 years old when Summer was SA'd. But even so, that was definitely old enough to know better. And if his sole purpose was sticking it to his brother, then there was absolutely no doubt that Sincere was the reason Saint was in the hands of Interpol in Paris. She was just glad that she still had quick thinking on her side, because the plan that she'd gotten Manny to agree to was haphazard as hell. She had whipped that bad boy together on the spot because she knew Manny was right. Saving Sincere was a lost cause. At this point, she was trying to save her damn self. If Sincere was going to wake up dead, it could not be her fault. If Hugh couldn't step down as the kingpin, that couldn't be her fault either. And God only knew, if something happened to Natalia, that really couldn't be her fault. If she knew nothing else about the heads of the five families, she knew they were good at picking sides and staying there. And the only reason why they stood by Nigel with all of his foolishness was because the only person he ever lied to was her. The women he cheated on her with always knew that he was somebody else's husband. No matter what they thought they knew about his marriage to Catherine, the expectation that they might have had that he was going to leave his wife, they'd made up in their own heads. Because Nigel wouldn't have told them that. If there were any differences between Nigel and Sincere, that was it right there. Nigel wasn't taking anything that a woman wasn't freely giving, and while he always got what he wanted, the women were always willing participants. He was an old school player from the Himalayas. Too bad his son didn't get that Jane, because that the five families could live with. But she didn't have time for memory lane or to be comparing and contrasting Nigel and his sons. She had to make this plan of hers work. So she called Ezra. In the back seat of the chauffeured car, Sincere just kept staring at the ultrasound pictures in his hands. He'd seen the positive pregnancy test and the DNA test results that said he was the father. But until he was looking at the fetus on the ultrasound monitor, his impending fatherhood had just not been real. Watching his unborn baby move around inside Nell was weird as hell. He said, "You feel that?" Janelle said, "No, I guess I do. I don't know. It just feels like butterflies." The ultrasound tech said, "It's a little early for you to feel real movement. I'd give it a couple more weeks." Sincere asked, "Will I be able to feel it on the outside?" The ultrasound tech said, "No, that'll be a couple of months away." Then she turned the machine up and he heard the craziest sound. It sounded like the damn Kentucky Derby in there. He said, "What the hell is that?" The ultrasound tech said, "That's your baby's heartbeat." And Sincere just froze. Catherine was right. There was a human being growing on the inside of Nell. And that human being was his kid. He was going to be somebody's damn daddy. He was flabbergasted. After 40, 50 seconds, he finally said, "Is it supposed to be that fast?" And the ultrasound technician said, "Yeah, The baby's heart rate should average about 150 beats per minute. It's working pretty hard to transfer vitamins, minerals, nutrients, and oxygen through the blood that's being transferred to it through the umbilical cord. He or she is growing and changing by leaps and bounds every single day. Then Sincere asked a gang of questions. Can the baby hear? Can it feel pain? Is the baby affected by what Janelle eats, drinks, her emotional state? The man asked so many questions, I can't even list them all here. But the technician was ready. She said, I absolutely love when an expectant father comes in with a load of questions. And I wish I had time to answer them all. I can answer any questions you have about this ultrasound. But for more information, you should go to a website called fathercraft.com. It breaks down the whole pregnancy by trimester, then by each week, what your partner may be experiencing, all the things you can do to support her, what to expect at all of her doctor's appointments, and it actually addresses a lot of the questions you just asked. For instance, your baby will be able to hear you in about 2 more weeks. And right now, he or she is already opening and closing his or her eyes. There isn't anything for your baby to see. Your baby's definitely practicing. And if you press right here, and then she took Sincere's hand, pressed it in the area of Janelle's abdomen, where the baby's feet were located, and said, and keep your eyes on the monitor, you'll know for sure that your baby can in fact feel. And as Sincere watched and pressed in the area where the technician instructed, he saw his baby move his or her foot. He snatched his hand back in shock and just stared at the screen. He thought to himself, now that's where Catherine was wrong. Moments like this one is what helps fathers endear themselves to their unborn children. I ain't never gonna forget this. And I ain't never gonna be the same. And then Janelle ruined the moment by saying, why you look like somebody just threw a bowl of hot piss in your face? So in the back seat of the chauffeur car, Janelle said, Sincere. When he finally looked up from the ultrasound picture, she said, where the hell are we going? Then Sincere looked around and realized they weren't heading back to the St. James estate. He said to the driver, where you going, Chief? The driver said, you'll need to call Mrs. St. James. Sincere said, I'm asking you. You the one driving. The driver said, I received instructions to take you all to an alternate location. And I also received instructions not to discuss it with you. Before Sincere could respond, Janelle said, just call your mama. Meanwhile, in New York, Sincere's ex-New York jump-off Amber was on her way to meet with her father at his office. She was going to confess her previous involvement with Sincere, his involvement in a criminal organization, and the fact that his concerns about her safety had resulted in her being followed around by a team of soldiers. Bosch had attempted to end things with her, but she talked into the mic and gotten him to change his mind, at least long enough to help her get to her father's office safely, and without being followed by Sincere security. Everything seemed to be going fine until Amber saw the soldiers fall in behind Dre. That was the name that Bosch was using. Just as she went through a yellow light and saw him slow down, preventing the soldiers from making the light, she was T-boned in the intersection. Her airbags deployed, her head was spinning, and then she heard her voice say, this is OnStar. We've detected a crash. Do you need police, fire, or medic? And then she saw emergency lights. So she said, none of the above. They're already here. And then she passed out. When she regained consciousness, she was in the back of an ambulance. EMT verified her name, that she was aware she'd been in a traffic accident, then asked if she had an emergency contact that they could notify. And then she remembered she was on her way to her father's office. He would be expecting her. She said, my father, I need to call him. She tried to sit up and reach around to look for her cell phone. She realized that she couldn't move. The EMT said, we had to restrain you. You were thrashing around quite a bit. If you give me your father's number, I'll make sure that he knows what hospital to meet us at. And then Amber gave the EMT her father's name and phone number. Then he said, I'm sure you're in a lot of pain. I'll give you something for that. And before she could decline, she was knocked out. The next time she woke up, she was tied up in a basement. And when she looked around, Dre, Bosch, was tied up right next to her. She called his name over and over again until he finally came to, saying, you all right, shorty? Amber said, oh my God, Dre, where are we? What happened? What did they do to you? Then Bosch lethargically and weakly told Amber that after she went through the intersection and was T-boned, he went to jump out of his car to run and see if she was okay. And somebody hit him over the head, pushed him in his car, and drove off. It was obvious that he'd been beaten, tied up, and taken to that basement. But Amber had no idea how she'd gotten there. Her last memory was being in the back of an ambulance. Meanwhile, in Miami, Sincere and Janelle had just arrived at a St. James family safe house. When he'd called Catherine, she told him that there was an issue. She'd meet him there and tell him more about it when she got there. Sincere had racked his brain, and he couldn't imagine what this was about. The only thing he'd done was list a soldier's help in stalking Natalia, and it couldn't be about that. To make sure, he tried to call that soldier and did not get an answer. And when Catherine pulled up shortly thereafter, Sincere was waiting for her on the front porch. He said, "What the hell going on?" Catherine said, "Inside, now." When they got back inside, Catherine said, "I just got word that somebody's looking for you. Apparently, the traffickers have Amber, and she's been talking. Any idea what she might have said?" Sincere said, "You got to be kidding me. I thought you was handling that." Catherine said, "Apparently, she shook her security and was intercepted. We had a man connected with her, but he's missing too. That means that you and Janelle will be at this safe house until further notice. I would send Saint to follow up, but he's trapped in Paris, remember?" Sincere said, "We got thousands of employees. You mean to tell me ain't nobody else that can handle this other than Saint?" Catherine said, "Of course there is. But you're not going to be here in hiding while everyone else does the work. This is your mess, and you're going to help clean it up." Sincere asked, "What about Natalia? She still at the house? She good?" Catherine said, "Don't worry about Natalia. You need to worry about what all Amber's got on you. What all could she possibly tell the traffickers? If there is anything that they can use against you, you need to tell me now." Sincere said, "She don't know nothing. Saint told her what was up, and when I went to see her, I followed the script." Catherine said, "Obviously she knows something. She knew enough to send them looking for you in Miami." Sincere said, "I didn't tell her anything about this life. But of course, we talked some about my old life. But everything I shared was focused on what she and I had in common. And that wasn't much." Catherine said, "What was it?" And Sincere said, "Our extracurricular activities." Catherine said, "And what did that entail?" "You might as well tell me. It's going to come out." Sincere said, "I told her about a couple of times when I gave girls a little something to help them relax. She got a thing for picking up girls and taking them home and having a little fun. They not always into everything she into." And then Catherine knew that her suspicions were 100% accurate. Sincere was, in fact, a repeat offender. She said, "So you and this girl, y'all gave other women rugs and took advantage of them. Is that what you're telling me?" Sincere said, "It only happened once, and I couldn't stop picturing my sisters, and I realized that it was a terrible thing to do, so I never did it again. Like I said, I did it once or twice when I was younger, and I didn't know any better." Catherine asked, "Does anybody else know about this?" Sincere said, "I told my pops, and he found the woman. He made me confess to her, and then he paid her off. I told Amber we could never do it again. I never told her about the confession or the payoff, though. I ain't tell my pops about what happened when I was younger." Catherine asked, "Who were they?" Sincere said, "It don't matter. It was a long time ago. It's over with." Catherine said, "It matters. You don't think that the traffickers are going to find out if they don't already know? You don't think that they're going to use this against you, against the 5 families? I am trying to help you. We've got to get in front of this. Your brother isn't here to clean up your mess. I vouched for you. This is on me." Sincere said, "A girl named Gretchen and a girl named Summer." Catherine said, "Gretchen? Chantal's best friend?" When Sincere looked away, Catherine said, "Saint's best friend Summer?" And then Catherine collapsed in a chair, because it all made sense. Chantal's loyalty to her pastor, her love-hate relationship with Sincere, Nigel offering Saint his seat at the table, and never offering it to Sincere. She was sure of several things. Sincere would never be kingpin. She was going to have to keep him busy and away from Natalia until Saint was back and free. And Amber had to go. But first, Bosch was going to have to get Amber to spill every and anything she knew about Sincere and about her father and her family. And when it was all over, they were going to have to leave the International Trafficking Organization holding the bag. Meanwhile, in Maryland, Natalia had just finished crying and praying. She was completely undone. The entire situation was out of control. She knew how the five families worked. She understood her father's role in the five families, but she'd made it her business to stay out of the five families' business. And her father had done a really good job keeping his business life from affecting his personal life. In Natalia's 25 years of living, she could not recall a time when she had reason to actually be concerned about her father's welfare. She was sure that he'd been in touchy situations, but he'd gotten in and out of them unscathed. And without her knowing anything about it, he'd always made it clear that his work was dangerous. It was up to him. His daughters would stay far, far away from it. They wouldn't be involved, and they wouldn't be involved with anyone who was involved. He never forbade them from dating or being in relationship with anyone in the life. He figured his own life was cautionary tale enough. So instead, he made sure that they had the tools that they needed to take care of themselves, make good relational choices. The last time she'd spoken to her father, he was truly apologetic about keeping her in the dark about the fact that Sincere and Art were brothers. He assured her that he trusted her to make the best decision and the right decision for herself. He wasn't concerned about her choosing the right man, because as far as he was concerned, it wasn't about choosing between Sincere and Saint. It was about choosing herself, her own future, and the promises over her life. And if she could see one of the two of them being a positive contribution to her life, then he was all for it. Had he known about their lifelong rivalry, he would have never even taken that chance or left her having to make that kind of decision. And when she spoke with him, she didn't know much about it either. At that time, all she knew was that Saint had walked away, because he'd said if she ever had to choose between him and another man, she should choose that other man. He wasn't willing to engage in a game of tug-of-war with his own brother. Had she known what she knew now, her conversation with her father would have probably been different. And had she known that her father would have been snatched by the International Trafficking Organization by his own design, she probably wouldn't have followed Saint to that overlook in Miami. Because as far as she could tell, Saint was probably her father's best bet of getting away from the international traffickers. She knew what her mother said, but how could her father possibly be kidnapped and perfectly fine? When Miss Eugenia told Natalia that Big Nate headed up an operation where he was intentionally kidnapped, she also told her that not only was that always a part of the plan, but that her father had done his big one. He'd figured out who was behind the plot and ensured that everything was in place to back that organization into a corner where the only way they could possibly get out of it was to complete assignments for the five families and guarantee his safe return. Miss Eugenia said, "Baby, I talked to Manuel myself. He assured me on his children's life that not only has he gotten proof of life, but he's seen and spoken to your father. He's eating good, sleeping good, and calling the shots from inside that other criminal organization's safe house." Natalia said, "But that's crazy. Why would they kidnap him and then treat him like royalty?" Miss Eugenia said, "No, baby, I don't know all the ins and outs of how they all worked this out. What I know is that Manuel wouldn't lie to me about it. And I told you before, your father don't poop without telling me about it. Before he sent me to Texas to stay with you, he told me that he was involved in a very sensitive operation, that he couldn't tell me the details, but that he'd made Manny promise to inform me if one of two things happened. One, something went wrong and he wasn't coming back. Or two, the plan went off without a hitch and they had the enemy right where they wanted him. So when Manuel called me, I was prepared for the worst and overjoyed that it was exactly what your father said it would be. I'm not just taking Manuel's word for it. I'm taking your father's. He also told me that when this was over, he was retiring. All we need to do is sit back and wait and let the five families do what they do." Natalia asked, "How do you do it, Mommy? How do you sleep at night, knowing your husband, the father of your children, might not make it back home to you in one piece. How do you pray to God and beg for his safety, knowing that in order to do what he does, he has to break 1, 2, 5 of the 10 commandments? Miss Eugenia said, I pray for his heart, baby, and for God's will to be done, whatever that may be. I thank him that we don't get what we deserve. Even when we think that what has happened is the worst thing that could happen, the truth is that it could always be worse. I accepted a long time ago that the only person's choices that I'm responsible for are my own. The only person's actions that I control are my own. And while I might very well be guilty by association and complicit by my inaction, the only thing I'm really guilty of is loving an imperfect man. And that love is imperfect too. God knew who he would be before I ever met that man. And he knew who he was when I married him, even though I didn't. Your father didn't tell me what he was into when we were dating, and we'd been married for years before I really had an idea. My reaction to that is why he tells me everything now. Natalia said, wait a minute. He told you that I was dating Sincere and Art and they were brothers? Miss Eugenia said, no, he told me that you were dating 2 brothers and that you were not aware. But he didn't tell me it was Sincere and Saint. I put 2 and 2 together all by myself before Catherine even told me. And had any of us had any idea that Sincere was a certified psychopath, none of us would have allowed that to happen. I know it's hard for you to believe, but I'm pretty sure that Catherine had no idea. I made it my business to spend time with that woman, to find out who she really is. My instincts are pretty damn good. She is not complicit in Sincere's evil. And while she is a calculating mastermind, it isn't with malicious intent, baby. But the only way we're going to know for sure is if we ride this plan of hers out.